Hello everyone, it's NADI and welcome back to Makeup and Mayhem. As you lovely people know, any tiff you may have, please cast it away because this is a channel of positive energy, okay? Thank you. Sure, so many of you are like, oh, look at that lovely young Amish man. I am gonna do kind of grunge makeup and I have a black bomber jacket, so once everything is on, hopefully it'll look kind of circus-esque because today's story does kind of have to do with the circus. This is probably one of the more darker stories that we'll have on here, so sorry about that. It's about Grady Stiles, the infamous Lobster Boy, which I actually wasn't even going to cover this on this series. I was gonna use this as a story for my Stitch and Bitch series because there is kind of an intriguing history, but I didn't realize the gruesomeness of this story until I was all done with my research and just reading over my notes, and I was like, I cannot have this on a happy series called Stitch and Bitch. So we're gonna bring it over here. If you've never seen my Makeup and Mayhem series, it is heavily inspired by the Queen Bailey Sarian. I love her. She's really helped me realize that I fucking love telling stories, and now I've got other spin-offs of this series, so yay. But I'm basically just gonna be sitting here telling you an enthralling story, doing my makeup. I'm not gonna be talking about the makeup, but I'll try to list everything that I'm using down in the description below in case you're curious. But yeah, let's just hop into this. I do have a couple little prelude comments, and one of them is that yes, this has to do with the circus, and the people involved in the circus label themselves as freaks. I just feel so weird calling somebody a freak, because growing up when somebody would call me a freak, it was mean, but these people kind of wear the label freak as a badge of honor. These individuals who are in the circus know that they are one of a kind or just super freaking special, and so when I say like freak, even though it does feel weird to say, I'm not meaning it in like a demeaning way. Also, the story does deal with a condition called electrodactyly. I think I'm saying that correctly, but I just want to remind people that nobody that I'm talking about today really represents any kind of community as a whole. The fact that somebody has electrodactyly doesn't mean that they are good or bad or evil or anything like that. We're all human no matter what we look like. So just because the main character has this condition, please don't think that everyone is like this, like fuck. But our story today is about Grady Stiles, aka Lobster Man. You may have actually heard of him or seen characters like him portrayed on American Horror Story. He was born in June of 1937. Holla to all the fellow Geminis out there. And he was one of 4 siblings, all of whom were born with the same condition. For those of you who don't know, Lobster Hands, which I don't know if that term is offensive, I really apologize if it is, it's formally known as electrodactyly. But in like a super condensed definition, it's basically where you grow and you're either missing some fingers or they're fused together, and it can affect pretty much any of your limbs. And so sometimes individuals will have all of their fingers, but they'll be fused together so it'll just look like 2. Sometimes their fingers will literally go all the way down to their wrists, and it can just really affect the growth of all of your limbs. And it's one of those genetic disorders where when you have a baby, you never know what you're gonna get. It's like putting a quarter in the gumball machine because everyone is so different. No 2 cases are really ever the same. In Grady's case, his arms were normal, they grew with him, and then he did have pretty much claws for hands, which is why he got the name Lobster Boy. And then his legs, when he was a baby, they seemed perfectly fine. However, below the kneecaps, everything just stopped growing, so he didn't really have functioning feet or legs. And in Grady's family, being born with this condition had been happening for hundreds of years. In fact, almost every kid in the family was born with this condition, and it seemed like with every generation, it would just get a little bit more jumbled. And I don't want to say the deformities were becoming more extreme, but they kind of were. And when you're dealing with a condition that's genetic like this, really the only way to stop it in its tracks is just to stop procreating and adopt. Well, Grady's family didn't adopt. So by the time Grady was born, his disfigurement was probably one of the more extreme cases in the family, but not to the point where he couldn't have had a fantastic freaking normal life. He was very independent, very self-sufficient. He was able to do pretty much anything. Even though he didn't really have usable legs, he was still perfectly fine on a wheelchair, and he was able to get around other ways. Point of the fucking story, he was very capable to do pretty much anything. Hold a gun, drink some water, hold a bat. But the Stiles, they belonged to the carnival. Like, they were all about that carnie life, and this was their tradition since like the 1800s. So many of their family members were being born with this condition that they just created a whole fucking circus around it called the Lobster Family. That is smart business thinking. You go, Lobster Family. But really, it was super smart. Like, this was a long ass time ago. People were just not as progressive with their thinking as they are now. And so rather than just being cast to the side and letting society throw them away, they turned their uniqueness into a business. Like, snaps to you. So in the Stiles family, if you were born with this condition, you'd be put into the show, and then if you were born normal or whatever, then you just help out with the show behind the scenes some other way. But they were like a legit circus. They had animal acts, fellow freaks, they even had sword swallowing, which I mean, that's just a regular Tuesday night for me. But they started their show in the States in Pittsburgh, and it really did quite well. People would just swarm from miles around to see this little circus family that they created, and it just grew and grew and grew. They added a horse act, a band, cotton candy, like this was getting legit. You know, if there's cotton candy, then shit is for real. And it was real. Like, if you convert what they were making a year back then to now's currency, in USD, they'd be raking in over $1 million a year. Not too shabby for being labeled a freak. So needless to say, their shit was popular. Plus, all this money coming in was pure pocketable cash for the style, so they were just able to live very, very comfortable and lush lives and kind of made their own little world. Like, they didn't have to go to any jobs where they'd be ridiculed, although people did kind of come and stare at them and goggle, which can't be pleasant, but you know what I mean? Like, they didn't have to go out into the world and face dirty looks or just the judgy ass bitches that people were back then. They could just live richly in their own little solitude. But all of the horses and the popcorn and the smell of spun sugar and roasted peanuts and the red and white circus tents, that was all fluff. What people really wanted to see was this Lobster Boy. Who is that? People were just so interested in this whole family who had deformed hands, and now they're adding to the mix somebody with deformed feet? Sign me the fuck up. Very interesting, but okay. So it was like the earlier 1900s, so people sucked that shit up like we suck up drama and liquor now. So to Grady's dad, who had been thrown on stage when I think he was like 4 or 5, this life was really all that he knew, and it was just natural to then throw Grady on stage when he was like 4 or 5, and so began Grady's career. Dad sounds like one of those bitter dads, like, if I have to work in the factory, so do you. Except carnival style. Growing up, Grady was kind of said to be the exact opposite of Elephant Man, who Elephant Man had kind of a rough exterior, but the inside of the gentlest little kitten ever, just so sweet and nice. Grady, he didn't necessarily have a rough exterior, it was his inside that was kind of rough, which I can't imagine why. He was literally thrown on stage as a kid, and all through the 30s, the 40s, and even to the 50s, he was gawked at. I'd probably have a few issues too. But whatever issues Grady had, once he was on the stage, it was like fucking Beyonce and Sasha Fierce. Those issues just let him go. He became this different persona and would captivate the audience. He would just have them in the palm of his hands like fucking silly putty. So in reality, it's not like he was really being prodded with a hot poker to get on stage or anything. He liked it, he just liked to complain about it more. But as much as he would complain, he very quickly realized exactly what his dad saw was the amount of profit that they can turn with their disability. And I don't know why, but very early in life, he'd kind of grown bitter about his condition, yet he'd wear gloves off stage because nobody gets a show for free. But I don't think his bitterness really shone that much when he was sober, and so to this day, people who have seen his shows will probably say that it was the best thing they've ever fucking seen in their life. He really added a lot to their circus, and so it started growing and they had to hire more people. One of them being a fellow carnie named Mary Teresa, who I guess you would say was normal. I don't know what we classify as normal, but she didn't have any like carnie-esque features. Mary did kind of have a tough upbringing. Growing up, she survived incest and abuse, and eventually she just threw her hands up, said fuck this, and when she was a kid, she ran away and joined the circus. When she was growing up, she would go on stage, so she was used to that lifestyle, but by the time she was hired by the Lobster Family Circus, she was like, I just want to be behind scenes for a little while, so that's what they hired her as. And it wasn't very long until she began to feel butterflies in her stomach every time she'd see Grady. Who is this intriguing man? How could you not be attracted to him? He was charming, he commanded the audience, he just emulated power. And unlike pretty much everyone else, she didn't see Grady for his hands or his feet. She wasn't blind, she was just so used to being around unique individuals her entire life that she just looked past it. I like that way of thinking. You go, Mary, we love acceptance. She looked past Grady's differences and saw straight into his soul, his heart, and eventually they fell in love. And life was wonderful for these two. Romance was in the air, business was booming, and eventually they decided to finally tie that knot and get hitched. And back then, often with marriage comes children, but they just weren't certain if they wanted to have children because they knew that this condition was handed down from generation to generation, and they weren't convinced that the life they were living was necessarily the one that they wanted for their children. Like, it's fruitful, but it's also kind of stressful. It's always on the go. You're always kind of, in a way, being made fun of. But on the other hand, the Stiles family had been producing children like this for so fucking long. It dated back to like President Polk, which I think was like the 1840s. And so Grady was like, do I want my bloodline to stop right here? Well, this family actually took kind of great pride in having this condition. In fact, when the grandpa was talking to both Mary and him, he kind of proudly said, well, your baby does have a 50-50 chance of getting it. After all, this was a condition that kind of funded their lifestyle. They embraced uniqueness because cha-ching! So Mary and Grady decided that, like most parents, whatever they have, they will love it unconditionally. A sweet little bebe. And eventually they did have 2 kids named Donna and Kathy. Now, Donna was born without any deformities at all. However, Kathy did inherit her dad's extremities, so she was wheelchair bound, but they loved those babies as the perfect little peaches that they were. And just like tradition, Kathy was thrown onto the stage at a very early age, and then Donna was kept in the cellar because she was normal. So basically the opposite of a Kennedy. Imagine that. No, I'm just kidding. They didn't put her in a cellar. She was fine. She basically just worked behind the scenes with the rest of the crew who weren't in the show. And they really did have it all. A great house, a nice family, a job that paid very well. And Grady's parents had gone through the Great Depression. He'd seen the toll that it took on the world, so he knew how much of a blessing having this success was. But still, despite having what seems like it all and just being wildly successful, Grady still wasn't happy. He wasn't satisfied with something. He would drink obnoxious amounts until he would be in a drunken, self-shitting stupor. And as time progressed and his children got older, his alcoholism only got worse. That little turd started abusing his wife, his children, and it wasn't just like physical abuse, it was mental abuse. It was just like every kind of abuse. And one of the ways Grady would get around is to kind of walk on his hands. He wasn't like doing a handstand, but if you imagine how a chimpanzee kind of gets around, like they scoot on their fists, that's how he would get around. And so at a very young age, he started building serious upper body strength. Like when he was a teenager, he looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger, just ripped as fuck. So he would use his strength to put people in a chokehold, wrap his hands around their neck and choke them, and he allegedly used his fingers to forcefully remove his wife's IUD. Fucking ouch. Oh my goodness, like what the hell? So yeah, Grady really wasn't the happiest little grape on the vine. Alcoholism and a short-ass temper are never a good combination. And Grady was also starting to kind of favor Donna more because he said she was normal versus Kathy. And this also meant that Donna didn't get as much abuse as the others, which really created a rift between everyone. And it's not that Donna didn't get abused as well, it's just that she got less of it. Like, why does there have to be any fucking abuse in the first place? Don't blame Kathy, blame the fucking psycho that's abusing you. But he was really said to be, quote, a piece of crap, end quote, at least in the carnie community. Just an all-around well-hated guy. Now, obviously, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania does get a little bit nippy in the winter, and ain't nobody gonna stand in line for a carnival in the winter. Doesn't matter if they have an elephant wearing a tutu that can recite Hemingway doing sign language. So beginning in the 1940s, Grady's family started a tradition where they'd go to Florida, you know, where everyone goes to winter, aka God's waiting room. So pretty much all the carnies would then pack their shit up for the winter and go down to the Tampa Bay area in a little city called Gibsonton, which was kind of known as a safe haven for carny freaks. Pretty much just a sideshow town, which I think that sounds so cool. In fact, as you'd approach it, there'd be a huge sign that said Giants Camp. And if you saw that and you were kind of a one-of-a-kind person, you knew that this is your safe space. And get this, the name was actually true, like giants did camp there. The owner was like 7 or 8 feet tall, and the kicker is he just happened to marry the world's only half girl. She was born with only her upper torso. They ended up having kids, and from what I've heard, were absolutely lovely people. And for those of you wondering, no, I don't know if the 8-foot man was proportional everywhere, because I know that's the first thing that came into your mind. But you'd just be driving around town and see all these people living their best fucking life. You'd see bearded ladies, guys with nails to the ground, 3-legged goats, people on tight wires just walking. I don't know, but this sounds like my kind of town. In fact, this place was so diverse friendly that even when you'd go to the post office, they'd have 2 levels of counters. They'd have one that's like normal height and then a shorter one for the little people. How nice is that? Well, this town also housed the trailer that Mary, Grady, and the kids lived in. And I guess at some point during their marriage, Mary did want to hop back on stage, and she'd become known as Electric Girl. She'd just sit in kind of like an electric chair looking thing, and they would pull a lever down. It would look like she was getting electrocuted. Somehow they made sparks fly out of her fingers. I don't know how they did all that, but cool illusions. Well, no matter what sparks were flying on stage, it certainly wasn't happening in the marriage. Mary had had just a fucking bout enough of Grady's abusive bullshit, but it actually wasn't Mary that left. Grady was the one that kicked both Mary and the kids out. Really, what an all-around piece of shit. Well, poor Mary, she had been married once before Grady. Now, Grady was leaving her, but she did find love a third time. His name was Harry Glenn Newman? Is that it? Yes, Harry Glenn Newman, who is infamously known as Midget Man. Don't come for me. That was his stage name. He picked it. Harry and Mary then had a son who they innovatively called Harry Jr. and would soon take the stage as Blockhead. His talent was shoving nails up his nose. Like, that's his real talent. And how the fuck do you find that talent in the first place? Was he just like picking his nose one day and went a little too far in excavating? No idea, but back to Grady. He eventually finds love again, bless him, and marries a woman named Barbara, and they have a baby who they innovatively name, can you guess it? Grady Jr. The creativity levels are just beyond me here. Well, actually, I think he was called Little Grady, but he too was born with his father's condition. Well, time moves on, the children grow up as they tend to do, and in 1978, Donna finally meets a man. I think she was like 16 or 17, but she was absolutely smitten with this young gent named Jack Lane. Not Jack LaLanne, but Jack Lane. She was like, Mom, Dad, I think I found the one. I've never been happier in my whole fucking life. So of course they go through the whole inseparable phase, and then shortly after they are engaged. To go, girl, we all deserve that happiness. Happiness though, says Grady. Somebody's happy? We can't have that. Sourpuss Grady never really gave two shits for this guy. He just did not like him. Like, heaven forbid anybody is happy around Grady. But I don't really think that he didn't care for the guy. I think that it was more that this guy was taking away his one normal daughter. And Grady was already kind of a really fucking mean guy, so this just did not sit well with him. But love is love, so Donna's like, I'm still going through with it, sorry, Pops. She had hated the abuse that she had to grow up with her dad inflicting pain on her and all the abuse. She just wanted to escape all that, have a chance at happiness with this guy that loved her. So the day before the wedding comes along, Donna goes and picks out her dress. It's not like how they do now where they spend a whole fucking month looking for the perfect dress. No, she just grabbed it, and then later that night, she and her soon-to-be husband were at their house chilling. While they're doing whatever couples do behind closed doors, Grady approaches the house completely alone and starts calling Jack's name. Jack, he screamed, come out to play. Both Donna and Jack are very confused, so they go to the door. Jack steps outside, Donna stays in the doorway, and next thing anybody knows, Grady's holding a shotgun, pointing it to Jack, and boom, he is gone. Donna is obviously beside herself. She just watched the man of her dreams get shot point blank with no defense. She runs outside screaming frantically, falls to the ground next to him, cradles his head until after a few minutes he finally passes away. What the actual fuck? How traumatic. Grady, of course, is charged because he just fucking shot and killed someone and is, of course, found guilty. But remember how I said Grady was an excellent performer and could wrap any kind of audience around his finger? Well, the judge was no exception. Grady really hammed up his condition, and the judge took pity, giving him guess the fuck what. Grady's ass got no jail time, no life sentence, no prison at all, but a simple probation. I don't know in what world that's acceptable, but okay. Dude just literally shoots somebody and gets away with it. And he didn't feel bad at all. Like, you want an inch of remorse, you aren't even gonna get a half a centimeter. Like, there is no other way to put it. Grady was a murderer. And because of what? The fact that this guy is gonna marry your daughter? So now the trial's over, and at this time, Grady's still married to Barbara. They had the kid together, but he's starting to get kind of a second wind. He had a new lease on life. He was given this gift of unjust freedom. And he thought, you know, I'm getting a little bit tired of old Barbie. She just isn't making my meatloaf like she used to, and I kind of want to go back to my first gal, Mary. Of course, Mary was still married to Midget Man, who honestly treated her so fucking nice, so kind, so sweet, but as far as she was concerned, at least in the love department, they were coming up a little bit short. Unfortunately, the world at that time was very, very cruel, and the public wasn't that accepting of Midget Man, so Mary would have to do a lot of things for him because of his size, and she was kind of growing weary of the life. Like, she already had a child to take care of, and when she had to take care of her husband, she was kind of weighing her options. She's like, happy marriage but really fucking hard work, or abusive relationship that pays the bills. Well, for some reason that one's higher, so Mary says, hell yes, Grady, take me back. So even after Grady kills Mary's future son-in-law, she's like, yeah, let's shack up. Mary accepts Grady's love offer, and if I had to guess, based on research, I would say that she went back to the relationship, one, because he really could charm the pants off of anyone, and two, because Daddy Grady could pay the bills. I think she was just at a point in her life where she just wanted a little bit of security, and Grady had it. So yeah, that happened. But no matter who you're talking to that knew Grady, even those that experienced his wrath, will tell you that he was a fucking master charmer. He could charm the chastity belt off a fucking saint. So it's not that he's at all a genuinely nice guy, it's just that he does know how to really fucking work the system, so he always gets what he wants. And Mary knew this, but she was willing to look past all of that because she saw dollar signs. But it's more so that drunk Grady is kind of the asshole. Sober Grady is totally fine, and at this point, he had completely stopped drinking, and Mary was like, this could actually be good. This could be similar to what a relationship relationship started off as all those years ago back when they were happy. Well, 1988 rolls around, they get remarried, life is sweeter than Splenda, and now they have a nice little combined family. There's Grady, there's Mary and Harry's kid, Harry Jr., the human blockhead. There's Grady Jr., and then there's Kathy. Donna miraculously escaped at this point and was already married with some man that Grady didn't fucking kill. But even with that murder under his belt, somehow they all look past it and they all work together in the carnival still. It is much more forgiving than I could ever be. Over the next few years, they would all as a family tour the US and Canada, and Grady was actually kind of a smart businessman. Or at least he was good at making people think things that he wanted to think, which we already knew he was a manipulator. But he would sell tickets labeled as like 10 acts for one price, so people thought they were getting like a hell of a good deal. But they actually were kind of getting a good deal because the 10 acts that they did have were fucking phenomenal. Then in the off seasons, they'd kind of haul their tits back down to Florida and live there amongst 3 little trailers. One trailer was for Grady, Mary, and Grady Jr. The one behind them was for Kathy, her husband, and their toddler, who was also born with a condition. And then they had a third one that had a helper living in it, but it was pretty much just to house all their extra shit. Well, one day while Mary was next door visiting Kathy, the helper who lived in the third trailer, Mike, ran in screaming, "He's dead, he's dead!" Kathy and Mary are like, "What the hell? Who is dead?" And Mike is like, "Lobster Boy Grady, he's dead." And Mary and Kathy are baffled. They're like, well, who could have done this? Obviously, the popos were called, and they thought this was very suspicious, which this is actually the first suspicious shot of today's episode, and I don't even have anything to drink. I literally drank it all while filming this, so we'll do a water suspicious shot out of my obnoxiously large Amazon water bottle. So yeah, the cops just didn't really get it. It's not as though a lot of people loved Grady because of the way he'd act when he was drunk, but he didn't really have that many known enemies, or at least enemies that wanted to kill him. Regardless, cops first questioned the family, and they swore up and down they had no idea who the fuck would do this. So the cops are like, okay, well, we'll just talk to the neighbors then. Oh, the fucking neighbors and their big mouths. Every single neighbor points their fingers, their toes, their claws, whatever they have to point with at the family. So they circle back around, and Harry Jr. spills his guts. Well, apparently not long into Mary and Grady's renuptials, Grady kind of decided to slip back into his old ways. He was just drinking all fucking day, being abusive, just drunkenly smacking people around, and when he wasn't doing that, he was sitting in front of the TV in his underwear like all day. And his hands, or his claws, whatever you want to call them, were actually very, very thick, very, very dense, and super heavy, so if you got smacked by one of those, like, you were out for the count. And Mary did not feel like basically having a brick thrown at her every fucking day. And she was like, shit, I can't leave him. I've done it once, and now people think I'm loony if I do it again. So Mary begins saving up every single cent that she has. She's checking the couch cushions in her car, and she ends up saving $1,500. All of which has to be completely untrackable by Grady because he can't know money's disappearing. But she takes this $1,500 and approaches her son Harry Jr. and says, we gotta do something about Grady. Harry gets the gist, but he doesn't know what to do about it, so he finds a 17-year-old named Chris who also lives in the trailer park and tells him about it, and Chris knows exactly what to do. He understands that Harry wants his stepdad Grady gone, dunzo, dead. So Chris makes his way over to South Beach to buy the cheapest fucking gun that he could find. I didn't say he was smart, I said he could get the job done. But really, he's about to take a guy out. You'd think he'd spend a little bit. So Chris wasn't the brightest bean in the barrel, but he still made a plan to come to the trailer and shoot Grady. Before Chris can get to it though, Harry Jr. does have cold feet, so he tries to talk Chris out of it with no luck. Like, Chris just wants to make his mama proud, and come rain or hurricanes, he was gonna do this job that he was hired for, damn it. So one day, Mary, Grady, and Harry Jr. are just chilling in the trailer. I think they had a movie on, and Mary just randomly up and says, hey Harry, let's go visit next door. So they skedaddle over to Kathy's, and Chris was waiting for them to leave. He sees his cue, and he enters through the back door, approaches Grady, who is just dead ass in his underwear, sitting in his lazy boy watching television. The floor must have creaked under Chris because Grady turns around and says, what the fuck are you doing in my house? Like, get out! And that is when helper next door, Mike, hears the loud pops of gunshots. By the time Mike comes to investigate, Chris has already disappeared, so he doesn't know who the fuck has done it. So Mike runs over to Kathy's, and that's when he's blubbering that Lobster Man is dead. Not that killing Lobster Man was necessarily the right solution to this, but the amount of relief that literally everyone in the court felt after that was just tumultuous. Grady's last years, and a lot of his years, were kind of monstrous. Grady didn't really leave this earth with a lot of people thinking that he's much of a great person, like not outstanding by any means. At least personally, with his show, I think he'll always be like in the Hall of Fame with that. But the family was especially happy. This man who abused them for decades, this man who killed a potential son-in-law, he was finally gone and they were not remorseful. Also, I think I'm gonna fill this in. Is that a little better? Yeah. So the second time when police questioned Mary, she was like, fuck yeah, I did it. Like, I ain't even mad about it. But she also explained to the cops that I was in a really abusive relationship. I was so unhappy. This dude was a terrible person. That doesn't do anything. So immediately, Harry, Chris, and Mary are taken in and charged, and they were set to be individually tried, but Mary, she was no fool. No, she got the best lawyer that her money could buy her. And the lawyer used a very unique defense method, which hadn't really been used much, I think maybe 4 other cases, but the defense basically said that this poor woman, Mary, had battered wife syndrome, which is basically like love and then abuse and then getting used to the abuse, so you're kind of in love again. But they were basically trying to say that this man fucked with her head, and so this is why she did it. Right before trials start, Mary's lawyer ends up sending out a videotape to all these media sources with no audio, and it's an old tape of Grady and his dad wrestling when Grady Jr. was very, very young, and the video is kind of scary to watch because it looks like this man has a toddler in a chokehold, like killing him. This is the only evidence needed for Mary to get off scot-free. Like, this is it. Well, one reporter who ended up writing an entire book about this shit show fiasco, his VHS arrived with sound. This is obviously a mistake, but the sound is of kids laughing in the background and Mary laughing in the background saying, "You get him, Grady Jr." This video was not of a dad choking the son. This is a father and a son playing, but they were trying to manipulate the audience into thinking that he was choking him. The reporter is like, I don't know if I should like submit this and get involved in the case because reporters typically don't get involved in cases. And after thinking about it, he says, I have to do something about this. Like, people's lives are literally in my hands and will be affected by the contents of this tape. So he submits it, and during the trial, people are fucking pissed when they see that he submitted it. Like, even the lawyers are sending him death threats. Mary was just beside herself. Like, this was the only way that she was gonna get off. And of course she'd be pissed because the moment the tape stopped playing, the jury immediately voted her guilty. So even though Grady got nothing more than a slap on the claw for murdering this person in cold blood, Mary now has to go to prison? Well, not exactly. Mary's judge was very compassionate about the case. He knew about all the anger issues, all the abuse that she had to deal with over the years. And they said, if you plead guilty, we'll give you 5 years. She said no, which actually ended up working in her favor because in the end, she was only sentenced to 3 years, most of which she had already served waiting for the trial. So now Mary's been out of prison for over 20 years. However, Chris was sentenced to 18 years. He's now out, but Harry Jr., the person who did the least amount with any of this, got life in prison. I am so fucking confused about that. Somebody's gonna have to explain that one to me because he wasn't even eligible for parole for 25 years. He could have gotten 5 years, but Mary, who is getting the same deal, said, fuck the system, they are screwing us over, do not take the deal. So just like her, he didn't, except he got life instead, and she just waltzed right out. She really fucked him over, and he's still in there because of her. That is just a damn shame. I don't think he deserved that. What do you think? This one is kind of a confusing one for me. Should Grady have died? Should she have gotten away with murder? Or an accomplice to murder? I don't know. What would she be? I don't think killing him was really the right answer because she chose to go back with him. Just because people think that you're a little bit loony for leaving somebody twice, like, who the hell cares what people think? I'm glad I painted my eyebrows like this because that is literally how they'd be otherwise. Just like a constant really face. This was a really interesting topic to research, especially because I found out that there's a lot of carny people out there that are quite riveting. I might actually bring a few of the life stories to my Stitch and Bitch series because they aren't quite depressing like this one was. But yes, anyways, there is our story. I'm not as happy with this look as I thought I'd be. I saw it in a really pretty black and white picture and I tried to recreate it in color and I feel like a gay Eddie Munster and I guess I'm cool with that. I hope you all have a beautiful and safe rest of your day and don't forget to smile at someone. You never know what people are going through. That one smile or act of kindness could just completely change somebody's life. But my loves, there you go. Thank you so much for being here. I love doing this and I love having you. If you'd like to support me and my channel just a little bit more, please feel free to join us over on Patreon. It's patreon.com/PopLuxe. There you get videos a day early. You got Patreon only content. Plus, best part, it is cheap, fun, and fancy just like me. And like always, please be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell down below so that you're notified anytime I upload a new video. Don't forget my newest collection of highlighters, including Black Ice, which does change from black to white, will be available again soon at thepopluxe.com. Also, my latest album, Kiss of Fame, is available everywhere online that music is sold. Thank you so much to everyone who's supporting them. Comment down below, let me know what you thought of this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Snapchat, Instagram, and Twitter at officialNADI, and you can follow me online at thepopluxe.com. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all, and I will see you again soon. Bye!